Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Education and Skills Service Transformation Committee on the 24th of January 2024. We don't have any apologies for absence, Gav.
No, Chair.
None received. Nobody's got any at the moment. Moving on to the second item on the agenda, do we have any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests? No hands up, no one in the room. So moving on to item number 3, the minutes of the last meeting. Can I go through them page by page, please? Page 1 and page 2. If we are content, I'll sign them on your behalf as a true record of the meeting. Are we happy?
Yeah.
All content? Yeah, there we are. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to number 4. On the agenda, we have a report, and I can see that Kelly is here again. Thank you, Kelly. Right schools, right places. We've also got Cabinet Member Councillor Robert Smith here. So can I ask Robert if you would like to kick this item off, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And can I also thank the officers for drafting the report before us this afternoon. As I think I've said on previous occasion, this is not about creating a hit list of schools or targeting certain schools for closure. What this provides, I think, is an outline in draft stage at this point of the kind of considerations that will need to be looked at when we consider the future of our school estate, where we want our schools to be, and more importantly, perhaps, what functions we want delivered on within the school estate and in individual schools, and that it will differ in future to what it does now. And also, I think it may very well differ between different neighbourhoods in Swansea, depending on each area's makeup and, more importantly, each area's needs. So I think we have a basis here to take the discussion forward. There are numbers quoted there, I notice, in terms of primary schools, secondary schools. They're not our figures. They're drawn from elsewhere. And what I would emphasize is, of course, that this is a local decision. This is a matter for us locally to decide, guided by national guidance. But that's what national guidance is. It is guidance. We make the decisions. If you compare the size of our schools to some authorities, they may be smaller than others. If you look at other authorities, then what we would consider a small school would be considered a medium, if not a large school in some authorities. So I think that's something that we need to bear in mind moving forward, and that needs to influence discussions in future. But I'm happy to hand over to the officers who will take us through this report, and then for this committee to discuss it. And then we can consider where we want this to go. Is this the basis that the committee wants to advocate, and then we can pursue it through the policy making process, Chair. So with those words of introduction, I'll hand over to the officers.
That's lovely. Thank you, Robert. Kelly?
Hello. Yeah, so this is my third and final report. It's not a very long report, as you will see, but I thought it would be better to get straight into the plan itself, because that's what we're all about, really, now that I've got a draft there as an appendix. So just quickly, under section 2 there, you'll see I've slightly changed the name of the plan, the suggested name of the plan, to a strategic school provision plan instead of just school provision plan, just to sort of outline really the nature of the plan itself. And just a reminder in 2.2 that what we're looking at is a contextual document that will draw then some conclusions about the need to add or remove school places within the city and county of Swansea. So when you get to the report, you'll see there aren't conclusions in there because, as Councillor Smith said, that's, you know, sort of if you agree the sort of principle of this as a plan, that's what we'll need to determine through further consultation and have our own Swansea view on those conclusions. It's useful as well to have a document, I think, that we can refer to, that the members of the public, parents, etc., can refer to, and be clear then why we are looking at school organisation in particular areas. So we've mentioned that under 2.3 that the plan would be running in parallel with the strategic outline programme for sustainable communities for learning, and so we'd have a sort of a 9-year plan with 3-year waves, and we'd be updating the data in those sort of 3-year wave periods. I'll go through the plan, like I said, in a second, so I won't go through paragraph 2.4 there. And as I said in 2.5, you know, we will need those conclusions, and it's likely, you know, that those conclusions would be where there are thresholds or trigger points where we would consider a review of provision. And of course, a review of provision doesn't mean it'll be a closure, you know, it'll just mean that we will look at all the options that are available, and it might not change anything that's that's in our school stock. 2.6, I'm just noticing that I have in the plan referred to a number of appendices, which I obviously haven't included at this stage because a lot of the data will be added, and I think I want to put in the most up-to-date information that we've got. So a lot will be based on our January 2024 PLASC, which is currently being collated from schools at the moment.
Thanks, Carol. Can you just say PLASC? Can you explain PLASC,
Oh,
please? I'm just conscious, so some people might not know.
Pupil level annual school census. So every school in England and Wales on a set day will count how many pupils they've got on that day on their register.
Thanks, Carol. Put you on the spot then, didn't I?
No, luckily Sarah remembered. So co-production and consultation under section 3 there. Obviously, we've got the council's QED programme board, and that's across directorate board. So I think that will be the main group that will lead the delivery of this plan. But we also we run it through education officers before it gets to that level, if you're happy with the format that we've got. And then we will need, I think, to consult with head teachers and pupils and just make sure everybody's on board and understands what we're trying to do before. Hopefully, if you're in agreement, we'll look at approval by cabinet. So that's it for my report as such. So if you're happy, we can go into the plan itself. So the contents obviously will update as we go through the plan. I put an introduction in there, which will just show how the plan links to the corporate objectives and other strategies that we've got within the council. So there's a number of strategies listed in that section there. And under sections 1.4 and 1.5, we're repeating the sort of frequency of the review that will take place there. If you go to the last part of that section, there's a statement there which I think is quite important on the top of the page. Sorry, my page numbers aren't matching the ones that are on there. On the top of your page 10 in the documents, where we're saying that we need to make sure that the needs of the present are met without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And I think that's always going to be important through everything that we do here. It's not just thinking of the now, we're thinking of the future as well, as per the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So section 2 then, demographic information. You'll see I haven't got information in these sections. There's quite a lot of sections highlighted in that, as I said, because we'll be gathering that and using the January data in the main, if you're happy with this. So we do know, though, as I've mentioned before, that pupil numbers are declining in Swansea. So it'll just be reflecting that there is that sort of drop there. And I'm looking at showing some sort of trends in section 213. Potentially we could have some graphs in there if that makes it a bit easier for people to sort of see on a visual sort of basis. So 214, noting that the reduction in pupil numbers isn't occurring evenly across Swansea. So it is having to look at each individual school and cluster of schools. And then 215 will be looking at how that reduction in pupil numbers is affecting surplus places in schools. So again, that could be somewhere where we do have a trigger point in our conclusions, again, to what point that surplus capacity leads us to looking at different options. I've noted in 216 as well, I think I had mentioned this in previous committees as well, that even though our numbers have been a little bit more buoyant because of inward migration, that we have seen a sort of decline overall in pupil numbers, but with the recent visa changes that came in on the 1st of January are going to mean that we're likely to see a reduction in children of university students coming through to Swansea, although obviously we will still have families linked to the hospital. So that 3-year refresh of data then I think is going to be important then, because it will reflect then what's actually happened on that background. 2.2, looking at housing. We've mentioned about LDP, the local development plan. We are in the hands of the developers for when they actually build the houses and when the pupils move, but that of course will be a determining factor in where our population shifts within Swansea and into Swansea. Under 223, I'm suggesting that perhaps we could note where we're noting that pupil numbers are decreasing without that increase in house building, or perhaps where there's an ageing local population, and we're looking particularly perhaps from sort of Gower, really, that's where we're noticing that sort of change. And 224 is noting there about parental choice. So of course, as it stands, if there's space in a school and a parent wants their child to go to that school, then they will be admitted. So parental choice does influence the surplus capacity in a number of our schools. So section 2.3 there was just listing the contents and the appendices that I was likely to put in there. So there's a lot of stats there, pupil numbers. We mentioned surplus places, number of special SCF places in schools, number of schools with sixth forms, links to the Welsh medium places, which of course will tie in with our WESP, and some visuals on sort of maps of the areas people know where we're looking at. And obviously things like condition of school buildings. As we said, we're going to dovetail this with the strategic outline programme for sustainable communities for learning, which is looking at new build schools. And then noting then as well sectors like voluntary aided, as well as the Welsh and English medium, and then the pupil turnover. Then under section 2.4, I'm suggesting some statements of assumptions for provision for pupils. So these are pupils who aren't in mainstream settings. So I've got examples there of how we would support pupils that are educated at home, looked after children, in secure provision, etc. So it's quite clear how we would support those learners within our Swansea settings. And continuing then over the page, looking at our pupil referral units, pupils in sixth form colleges, and sort of education in healthcare for children who are have got those medical needs. So section 2.5 is looking at school reorganisation, and I was thinking in there to put whether it be a summary or individual details of where we've gone so far in Swansea, because we have done a lot of school organisation over the years. So just trying to show, so that we have been reviewing and rationalising our stock for many years now. Section 252 is just noting that we're underway to amalgamate the two special schools in Swansea, and obviously with refreshes of this document we can update then for any other proposals that are underway when we do a refresh. And just noting for 254 as well that we could link potentially some of the SOP there, depending on timelines, because we are looking to go to Cabinet with that proposal shortly. Federations is an interesting one. I think we need to make some sort of statement there, because at the moment for federations, either governing bodies can propose a federation themselves, or the local authority can propose it for schools. We don't have any in Swansea as it stands, but 2 of our primary schools are currently in the process of proposing a federation themselves from the governing body point of view. So that's Nelston and Bishopston primary schools. And interesting, we had a discussion only this morning in our ADU Planning of School Places group, our All Wales group, and there seem to be different reasons why schools in different parts of Wales do federate. So some were quoting because they can't attract head teachers for very small schools, and others were saying that they, just to attract head teachers to work over a number of schools as well. So noting that some schools are actually unfederating as well. So it was just trying to, perhaps we need to get a little grip on what, the reasons behind that. And we said, as an All Wales basis, we will do some research into that. But as I said, we need to consider Swansea. When you look at federations in other authorities, they could be very small schools, as my cabinet member mentioned earlier. Our smallest schools in Swansea could be the biggest schools in other authorities. So policies and principles, we're looking at there again, where we link to other policies, particularly the WESP. We've obviously agreed the WESP through Cabinet, and that is saying that we do need to deliver more Welsh medium speakers in Swansea, so we do need to deliver on that. And also a school organisation plan is going to set out a number of policies and principles as well, so all of this does need to dovetail. So section 3.2 on school organisation. Again, as I mentioned earlier, and as cabinet members mentioned, there are trigger points that we do need to put in there. So I've quoted what the Audit Commission has said, but they are sort of at a point in time. So the Audit Commission might be suggesting points where we need to review, but that doesn't mean that we have to pick those up in Swansea at all. So we do need to have that Swansea view. And under 324, we're looking at, if we were looking at removal of excessive places, there's some examples there of what we could do with that surplus place, rather than looking at anything like a school closure. And it's obviously not an exhaustive list. There's a number of options that we can look at. So 325, we're looking at the additional learning needs provision. We'd always look at the impact on our most vulnerable learners when we're looking at anything to do with school organisation. And 327, again, is a clear statement there that we would only look at school closure where there is evidence that any alternative provision would be at least of equivalent quality and diversity of education. There is, in the school organisation code that we have to work to when we look at school organisation, there is a statement about rural schools, and there are extra steps we'd have to take if we wanted to close rural schools that are named in that document. And at the moment, we've got two. We've got Nelston and Penclawdd, the two schools in that school organisation code. 328 is noting that if we are looking at school organisation with any post-16 dimension, then we do need to link to Welsh ministers, and that's because the funding for post-16 settings is from a grant. It's not from core council funding, and so we would need to get them involved at a really early stage to make sure they're on board with our proposals. So section 3.3 is looking at appropriate size of schools. The sections there about primary, secondary and special. And again, we'd need to make our own view on where we thought our Swansea thresholds would need to be. And again, there's some sort of information in 338 there about some things we would look at if we were looking at the removal of surplus places as well. Section 3.4 is looking at size of class and teaching groups. This is interesting because even though there is still infant class size legislation there, we haven't had the descriptor of infants in use in our schools for a number of years now. Moved to foundation phase, and now obviously we got the curriculum for Wales coming through. So we need to be sort of clear, I think, about whether we feel those class sizes would have an influence on anything to do with school organisation. In particular for what was the junior class sizes, which never became legislation anyway. So we would need to think that through carefully. 3.5, diversity of provision. So just noting here really that, we have got a range of provision out there. So we do have, English medium schools, Welsh medium schools, denominational schools, both Roman Catholic and Church in Wales. In Swansea, we have a number of pupils with ethnic minority languages, and we do give parents a reasonable choice between those schools within Swansea. So 358 as well, again, is noting the growth in demand for Welsh medium, and as I mentioned earlier, we have committed to increasing that the number of places available in Welsh medium schools. So 3.6, accessibility of provision, again, noting that choice there. And there's some stats again then about the number of schools that we have in different sectors. And again, linking to the WESP. So the statement at the bottom of that page is, obviously, across the board there, adding or removing school places in one type of provision will have a knock-on effect to other sectors. So it's just making sure we note that and are aware of that before we start any school organisation proposals. And the same then under 369, we're looking again at secondary provision. So the same there, apart from obviously the links then between Swansea Skills Partnership and the City deal as well. I'd like to try and put a bit more padding in there if I possibly can, and referring to those developing sort of sectors. 3610 vocational provision. We do have a lot of vocational provision within Swansea and within our schools, and it would be useful to list that and the type of subject areas that that our learners can access. And then community provision as well. Then community focused schools is something that the Welsh Government are quite rightly prioritising at the moment. So it doesn't just mean opening the school up for lettings, it means engagement with the families, with the community, offering support to families and the community as well. So we need to sort of build up on that section, believe in there. And then we got 3.7, then the additional learning needs, which will need to align to the other arm of the SDC's work, which is looking at Kate's areas then, isn't it, of the SDF review and ALN reviews. And then we've got the section then, 3.8 accessibility to schools. So we did a workshop on transport, for example, there. So we can make a statement in there about where we are with our policy in Swansea on transport. And then again, section 3.9, just to summarise then, that's talking about our admissions policy. So again, just referring back to how we actually admit pupils. So all in all, this would be something if a parent looked at it, as I said, or a head teacher, or members of whoever's looking at this, then we'll know exactly what we're all about in Swansea, where we want to go. And then if we do come up with any proposals, people can quite clearly see then the link between this document and where we want to go. And as I mentioned, section 4, then I've left blank because that is the bit that's to be determined if you're happy to progress this report.
Wow. It's a broad and expansive, very broad and very expansive area. Before members put their hands up to ask questions on the report, I'd echo what Robert said. Well done, Kelly, on putting this together. This is a very complex baseline, isn't it? Looking at where we are today, where we've been in the past, and where we want to go in the future. And what I find really quite challenging is trying to juggle all the different variables. When I looked at this and saw all the data that's going to go in it, and then trying to predict what's Sandra's smiling there, it's like flipping heck. How do you do it? One phrase you used was that within the hands of the developers, in some sense. We don't know who's going to want to develop in what communities and when. So given that complexity, I think this is established a very comforting baseline for me to really outline some of those key challenges. So bearing in mind the complexity there, when I look at the report, there's a number of things that jumped out at me. In the consultation process, as the cabinet member said in his preamble, this is a million miles away from any decision. This is complexity. This is looking at the PLASC data, January 2024. Where are we today in great detail, and understanding that on its own is going to be very challenging. And then when we consult, can you explain a bit more about the process that we're thinking of? I mean, you mentioned the voice of the child as being fundamental. We have such a strong focus on the rights of the child in accordance with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is great. Heads and governing bodies, are we thinking more widely, directly, through the schools, PTAs, communities, the using of counsellors, etc.? Can you say a little bit more about the consultation approach that will follow on as we progress, Kel?
Yeah, I mean, what I was thinking was really sort of any stakeholders that might be affected by the proposals. So you've named most of them there, really. So the sort of head teachers, I think, will be key, really looking at this. And I think if there's an acceptance of sort of, like I said, some of the trigger points that would would lead to a review across the board. So we're talking about this in principle, really, not picking on individual schools then, isn't it? And if everyone's happy with that, then as a point at which we'd look into it, then I think that would be helpful. Yeah, we do always look to include learner voice in anything that we do, and we do have channels that we can already use for pupil voice, but we could look at expanding that into individual schools, potential workshops. Like I said, I haven't sort of got a defined, sort of consultation list on this plan, but I was intending then to show everybody under the first sort of appendix then on everyone who has actually been consulted on it. So I'm happy to take any views. I mean, we've obviously got quite a lot of local groups as well for children with additional learning needs, for example, that we can look to consult with. Yeah, so
It's lovely. Thank you, Kelly. This is going to be a big net to be thrown around Swansea, isn't it? There's going to be a lot of opportunity for dialogue as we go forward. Can I ask Councillor Mike White? Mike?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, Kelly, following on from the Chairman's comments on consultation, it is important, as you said, that we engage with all stakeholders, especially as you've mentioned, lots of schools are community schools, but also when we do the engagement and the information going out, can we set it out so that people are able to understand it? Because I think that is an issue that I think when might crop up, where people perhaps don't understand the process of how things are going to work. So I think that's really important, so they can feel on board and part of consultation as we take in any sort of ideas or projects forward. I think that's important. Yeah, in regards to housing as well, yeah, the north of Swansea is obviously the main prioritised area that we have within the LDP up to 2025. That's where most of the sites are that's been identified. But also, I know that within my school we're getting a lot of children that have come from other countries, asylum seeker families and that are coming into our school. And I believe in the school I'm with, I think we've got 17 different languages in our school the children attend. And I believe down the comp it's more about 23, 24. I suppose Bev would probably say it's the same down in the Harvard as well. So we are getting a lot of sort of input of children coming over from other countries as well. So that seems to be sort of keeping the numbers up. And in regards to the school buildings and the use of all the non-use, say, of demountables and other sort of facilities in the school. I think got to put the case forward that whatever we're going to put in place is going to be fit for purpose, and it's going to meet the needs of not only the school but for the communities as well. But I think that's something that we should perhaps involve within our consultation process as well. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mike. Can I ask Councillor Robert Smith, please?
Just to echo what Councillor White was saying there in relation to the consultation and the process being transparent and clear and explained in ways that is easy to understand. I think that is going to be crucial if we are to move forward on the basis of consensus in future. Recognizing, of course, is that we won't always agree, and people won't always agree with the decision that's reached, but the process that underpins that decision needs to be absolutely clear. And again, I support and echo what Councillor White said in terms of the demographic pattern within Swansea. We've seen significant changes over the years, certainly in my lifetime, and no doubt that will continue in different ways in future. And it's important that our school provision takes account of those demographic changes.
Thank you, Robert. I absolutely thanks as ever, Mike, for those insightful comments. So the process of local authority is often baffling to most of us within local authority, and I think that's a essential a key building blocks to have in place so people can see. where we are in the process now and how the process will pan out over time. And also, you know, I'm thinking of easy reads, plain language, that sort of thing, but also about the use of graphics, and possibly because this is so major and is going to impact so many people across the city and county of Swansea, maybe a short videos or something like that to really encapsulate some of the key challenges that we have. You know, I'm thinking about myself, you know, that sometimes I can understand things when I see them better than I can when I just read the text. I'm just thinking along the same lines as raised by Councillor White there, really. So the next person I've got on my list here is Councillor Lyndon Jones. Lyndon?
Thanks, Chair. Could I, first of all, put in a declaration of interest, because I missed the bit about federations. I'm on the governing body of Bishopston Primary School.
Thanks, Lyndon.
If I can note that. Could I thank Kelly as well? Gosh, you put an enormous amount of work into putting this really comprehensive report together. So really well done. I was looking at a couple of things. The bit about pupils educated at home, and I think it's really important, the point you made there, that you know, there needs to be some sort of oversight there at how they are educated, and to make sure that the child's needs are being met, because I think that is really vitally important. The other point I'd make is about vocational provision, because that again is really important, and you know, so that people know what is on offer. And you know, very often, unless they see it in black and white, they sometimes don't know what to go for. And I think if they do see that, that might actually open it up a bit more as well. And perhaps we have a job as well to sell that across Swansea, to show what's on offer. And I'd be really interested to see this report when we've got the data in January, now at the end of the month, when that data is put together, to see what the numbers actually look like. I think Councillor Mike White mentioned the LDP, and I think it's important that then when those houses are built, that we get the appropriate money from the various building contractors to help fund or go towards those new schools, or to develop the school buildings in those areas. Because I think that's quite important. So those, Chair, are the main points I'd like to raise. Thanks.
Lovely, thank you, Lyndon. I'd echo absolutely again those insights. When we're educating children in a non-traditional setting, one of the things that always occurs to me, as of course to everybody inside, in every officer, safeguarding and the effectiveness of the provision being delivered. But what I always think about is why in the first place? Why would you want to homeschool rather than access the provision that is made for people? So one of the things that I think would be interesting here is for us to consider clarifying in this process. Is a natural thing that will happen. Perhaps people will clarify what the offer is and how the offer is going to change. Our offer is exciting. It's going to be tailor-made. It's going to be aimed at meeting future needs. I wonder whether that might mean that we'd have fewer children educated in a non-traditional setting. Just a curious thing that always occurs to me. I mean, why would you want to spend all day, every day with your own kids in the house? I couldn't imagine how awful, you know, to send them to school and have a break, for goodness sake. But that's my view. So on that, thank you, Lyndon. And vocational
You won't get
provision.
consensus on that, but you will get consensus on home education. I think that's more likely, yeah.
I thought I'd just slip it in.
Chair, could I say on that?
Go on,
you know,
Lyndon.
very often, what I sometimes you know, worry about, it's not, when you go to school, it's not about just the academic side of it. It's actually mixing with other children and, you know, pupils there, and that's what you learn so much from that. And I sometimes think if you're not in that setting, you are missing out.
And I'd echo that. It's the social side of the school, it's the extracurricular activities that are offered, it's the opportunity to mix with other children, and I think children and young people, and I think that is something that needs to be borne in mind, and we need to be careful about when we're looking at this whole agenda, and I'd echo that, Chair.
thank you both. I couldn't agree more. Socialisation was the most important aspect of my early education, without a question. And the longer term impacts of not being socialised cause concern as well, I think. On vocational education, Lyndon, this is part of the innovation that we need to consider as we go forward, and we are. And we know there's so much vocational provision across our offer across Swansea. That the last point you made, Lyndon, about the data being made available, I'm sure that the data will be available in the final report that will come to the committee, and then we'll have that real full and comprehensive picture. Can I move on now? The next question, the next person with a hand up is Councillor Bev Hopkins.
Right, thank you, Chair. I'd also like to thank Kelly. It's a very detailed report, a lot of information, and it must have taken quite a time to put together. You did mention, and I don't know whether you're going to be able to give me the answer to this. You did mention in the report that there were 2 primary schools that, and you did mention the names of them, that you were concerned about the role, the falling role there. Have you got any data as to how many children are in these settings, or aren't you, or would you not be able to share that with us today? I'm only concerned over the fact that a few years ago we had similar problems with 2 other primary schools that we had to look at and close, and the numbers were exceptionally low in those. So I was just wondering whether we're going to be in a similar situation again, possibly.
Thank you, Bev.
I don't think there's any named in the report. The 2 schools that were named are Nelson and Penclawdd, which are classified as rural schools.
Right.
So there are specific rules around any reorganisation plans. And by the way, you know, well, apart from the federation, we know the federation is going ahead. But as far as Penclawdd is concerned, I'm not aware of anything, any changes at all there. Right, so just avoid any doubt. But no, those I think are the only ones that are named in the report.
Okay.
Obviously, you know, roles fluctuate. And I think I'm aware of at least one of the schools you referred to. That's before my time, admittedly, but you know, the roles fluctuate for a variety of reasons. I think that's captured in this report. It's housing changes, it's the student population, it's families moving in, and all the reputation of the school. That's a key importance, and I think that those are factors we need to bear in mind.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Bev. Thank you, Robert. Helen Morgan-Rees.
Thank you. I'm hoping my connection is working. So in terms of Councillor Hopkins's question around the size of a school, obviously size does matter, but it's not the only determining factor when considering any school closure, and that's not just in Swansea but across Wales. And I think the key factor is the quality of education. So if you have a small school where the quality of education is compromised and there's an inability to attract leadership to that school for whatever reason, then the offer for the learner is compromised, and that's when we're duty bound to consider really what's best for learners. So I think it's important to point out it's not just the size that matters.
Thank you.
That's
Helen.
lovely. Thank you, Helen. Is that okay, Bev?
Yeah, that's fine. And as Helen said, it's the type of education the children are getting, and I think that's where we were concerned when we closed primary schools a few years ago. It was the small amount of children and what type of education they were going to be able to access. So I know that was one of the factors, but thank you for that. Thanks.
Councillor Joy. Sandra?
Thank you. First of all, Kelly, you can tell you've lived and breathed this for a long time. Thank you for this report. Okay. One constructive suggestion that you may dismiss is I looked at, 3.6 about provision. Breakfast clubs and after school clubs, would you consider putting something like that in? Because that is absolutely, to some communities where, parents are working and so on, that is critical and is very, very relevant. If there were any changes to happen in a community, it could have quite a significant impact. And then my other questions are more about the document per se, is will we see it once you've added all the data in? In other words, where's it going next? As in, will we see it before it goes to cabinet? And will we be kept in touch with the document itself as it develops and as it gets that necessary detail on it?
Helen?
Oh, thanks. I'll answer some of Councillor Joy's questions, if that's okay for me to step in, Kelly. But essentially, in terms of next steps, I think the level of maturity of this document is quite high already, and notwithstanding the PLASC results that will be collected soon, as we've heard about, the document will be more or less finished. So we're in February now, so there is a meeting scheduled as a final meeting within the municipal year for this particular committee. So it is anticipated by the 17th of April you will have a document that is near final, but we can't say it'll ever be a final document until we've had stakeholder feedback. So that document will be near final draft, ready for wider consultation with a list of consultees that we will probably include as part of this document now, given the feedback from the committee today. So I think we'll be in a position in April, hopefully for the committee to say, well, there are no gaps in this document that the committee can discern, and it's probably right that it goes to Cabinet to consider the next steps then in wider consultation. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, Sandra?
Yes, thank you.
Just to remind people, we're in February in terms of council planning and procedures, but it's still the 24th of January today, right? Because I did look at the agenda to make sure.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Helen. So I can't see anybody else indicating online or in the room at the moment. It's just a couple of questions that I'd raise really. Federation. I think federation is fascinating, and thank you for your comments about federation there. And I know in previous meetings, not this year, in previous years, we spoke about this kind of idea of sharing, pooling, best practice, pooling efforts, that coming together in the interests of the offer to make the offer stronger. The quality and availability of senior leaders, of middle leaders in the school environment, and the quality of, when we think about the Welsh offer, 312 and 358, and we're thinking of that increasing demand for Welsh, the availability of Welsh language teachers. I mean, is that a question mark that we need to be mindful of as well? Is you know, I just, it occurred to me as we went through the report. At 3613, a community focused school, that old comment, and I made it once or twice in the past, I know that, it comes from Professor Alma Harris about schools not being islands in the communities. I think what I've seen, and I don't know if cabinet committee members would agree with this, is that an increasing focus on communities through schools right across Swansea. And I think we've seen that consistently in this committee, lots of evidence, lots of information that schools are, in my feeling, much more outward focused, much less inward looking. And I think that's been a breath of fresh air. So to see that focus there, 3613, to see that continuing, to see how schools can continue to step with communities is fantastic. I had the opportunity to talk to a group of children about Ravenhill Park. I'm involved with Ravenhill Park and taking that forward. And I went to Portmead Primary School this week to talk to 8 and 9-year-old kids about that, you know, and that's a little example of how the school is looking out to embed itself right into the realities of the communities that they serve, in line, of course, with the new curriculum for Wales, which is great to see. So I think that's it from me. Any other questions, any other comments? Anyone? I can't see anyone online or in the room here. So on that point, Kel, I'll add my congratulations and thanks to you for doing this. I think you probably dream about these matters, and your effort, your commitment and enthusiasm for putting this stuff together is incredibly well received by us and appreciated. We know what comes from this is how much care and passion there is, as well as professionalism. Thank you very much for that. So looking to find my agenda, that draws a line under agenda item number 4. And we now move on to agenda item number 5, which is the work plan. And we are, as Councillor Smith said, we're on the 24th of January now, right schools, right places. Now, on the agenda of the work plan, we've got the 6th of March 2024 and then the 17th of April 2024 for the end of year report. Now, looking ahead, we know that the March meeting of full council has been changed from 5 p.m. on Thursday, the 7th of March, to the day before, which was a clash with the 6th of March, where we were planning an STC, a Service Transformation Committee meeting. Helen has kindly confirmed that there are a number of important points at this time for us to be mindful of. So what I'm proposing to the committee is, given that the support insufficient specialist places focus, as Helen said, is more mature than we were thinking it was going to be at this point, because that has moved forward very significantly as well. And the report, I understand, and Helen can add a bit of value to this in a minute, I hope, is more or less in a final version now. Given the pressures on staff time, we are conscious of this. And given the fact that we've got some absences at the moment, unfortunately, too, then the proposal that I would put to the committee is that we cancel the meeting plan for March to allow the officers to have the time to put together the final report, and reminding you that that will be one report with two key sections: right schools, right places, and support insufficient specialist places. So that's my proposal to the committee. Can I ask Helen to offer a comment, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just a bit of further background. So if you recall, the Head of Vulnerable Learners came to the last committee and talked about supporting sufficient specialist places, which is a bit of a mouthful. But what it means in reality is that we are looking at redesigning how specialist teaching facilities look across the city and county of Swansea. So given that any changes to SDFs in Swansea would be subject to statutory consultation, it's very important that anything we commit to paper in order to consult on a statutory footing is very much worked up in detail before it comes back to this committee or onward passage for a recommendation to Cabinet. So it's really vital that we get that right. So it would be useful to have that officer time banked to focus really on getting that proposal to a level of maturity that can be public facing. So if committee agrees with that, it would be really helpful in terms of use of good resource and officer time.
Thank you, Helen. So can I ask committee members, are we content to cancel the March meeting and then we'll convene next on the 17th of April? Can I ask you to say or to hold your hands up in agreement if you are in agreement, please? There we are, that's unanimous. Thank you, everybody, for your support with that. So as I close the meeting, can I again thank Kelly, thank Helen, thank Sarah, and all the team for their efforts here. And Kelly highlighted this final point from me in her report. The Wellbeing of Future Generations Act 2015 was landmark. It was an international exemplar in international politics that we were planning for future generations. So it's not just about our children in schools today or tomorrow, or it's about the grandchildren of our grandchildren. That's what we are planning for. And this work will prove to be invaluable as we go forward. Thank you all very much for your attendance, your enthusiasm and your questions. And on that point, I'll close the meeting. Thanks, everyone.